Hi, welcome to the webinar. We'll start 2 minutes after the hour. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to get started 2 minutes after the hour. Hello, everyone. We're just going to get started 2 minutes after the hour. Hi, welcome to our webinar, How Ryder Customer Advisory Boards Drive Priorities. A few notes on housekeeping. We're recording the webinar. We'll send you the webinar afterwards. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them to us, type them in the Q&A box. We'll answer them along the way, time permitting. We might not have time to answer all the questions. We'll get back to you with the answers after the webinar and when we send the follow-up communications. So today Eyal Danon, President of Ignite, is gonna introduce our speakers, and he's gonna briefly talk about Ignite. And then he'll have a conversation with our guest speakers, Stephanie Wicky from Ryder. At the end, time permitting, we'll do some Q&A, and we'll close out with some CAB resources. Go ahead, Eyal.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Eyal Danon, I'm the president of Ignite Advisory Group. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and it's a pleasure to be with Stephanie. I've known Stephanie for many years right now, and Stephanie is just unbelievable. I think you're in for a treat. Stephanie is not only the vice president of marketing at Ryder, she's fully embedded and integrated into the business units. So she's not looking at marketing as a silo, as a separate function. It's part of the business strategy of Ryder, driving priorities for Ryder. So I'm really, really excited to have Stephanie with us today. And Stephanie is due with her third baby soon, any day right now. So thank you very much, Stephanie. Stephanie is going to introduce herself in a minute. Next slide. Just a brief overview about Ignite. We are the only firm globally that is dedicated to advisory boards. We don't really do anything else. We've completed more than 300 advisory board engagements with 300 different clients. And we developed many of the industry best practices. In terms of our solutions, you can work with Ignite to either create a board, optimize an existing board, get training. We have training in December coming up. We help with virtual meetings, and you can also hire a facilitator. I'll turn it over to Tatiana to do a short poll.
Sure. So please go ahead and answer our poll. What is the current status of your CAB program? Don't have a program, trying to launch, existing program on hold, program in progress, or expanding programs? And I'll give it about 20 more seconds. So thank you, everyone. Just to quickly share the results here, a majority of people on have a program in progress, and the rest are, some are trying to launch, some haven't started yet, and a few people are expanding the program. So perfect. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Eyal.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Tatiana. So it's my real pleasure to introduce Stephanie and Ryder. You know, when Ignite started to work with Ryder, I don't know if I shared it with you, Stephanie. One of my friends, you know, Ryder is kind of like a best kept secret, right? And I told, you know, I tried to simplify. I said, you know, they have warehousing and supply chain and trucks, and he says, like what, like 100, 200 trucks? So yeah, it's a Fortune 500 company. And Stephanie, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Eyal. And first of all, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be able to be on the webinar with you. Like Eyal said, he has worked with us for many years. I think that we engaged Ignite about 7 years ago when we started our customer advisory boards. I got involved with the boards probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And it's just been a pleasure to work with Eyal and his team and Ignite. They really help us expand our board program, create our board program, then expand it and just continue to evolve it. So that's been awesome. So yeah, I have been at Ryder now for almost 8 years. Marketing has been at Ryder for about 8 years. So as Eyal hinted, Ryder is a best kept secret, mostly because prior to 8 years ago, we didn't actually have a marketing function at the company. So the company is 90 years old. And the interesting part about them is that really for the majority of the life of Ryder, it has just been about having a very stable customer base and you know, offering mostly what we do on our fleet management solution side of the business. In the past, I'd say 10 to 15 years is when the company really started to focus on growth and wanting to expand our reach throughout North America and continue to grow and innovate. And so that's when about 8 years ago, we brought in our CMO, the first CMO the company's ever had, my boss, Karen Jones, who's amazing. And we grew our marketing department. So now I am the vice president of marketing. I head up all the go-to-market strategy, our data and insights team, our voice of the customer program, our Marcom group, which is our internal content agency, and our digital group. So it's been an exciting ride, and you know, it's been a pleasure to be at Ryder. So Tatiana, if you advance the slide one, I will give you guys a little background on Ryder. Just so everybody who's on the webinar is aware, I know that Eyal's team sent out an email, and in that email is embedded a video that will give you kind of a really good background on sort of Ryder and what our vision and our mission is and why it is that we do what we do. But we are a leading provider of outsourced logistics solutions. So we're a logistics company. We cover everything in supply chain and transportation you can think of. When most people think of Ryder, they think of Ryder as the rental truck company. Which, you know, we do have a line of business where we do B2B rentals, but it's a very small portion of what we actually do as a company overall. Like I said, we do everything you can think about when it comes to third-party logistics. So from renting a truck for your business, buying a used truck, leasing a truck, maintenance for your fleet, and all the way over to the supply chain side where we do warehousing, inventory control, e-commerce, dedicated transportation with, you know, fleets of drivers that we manage. So really soup to nuts, everything in logistics. So we are a Fortune 500 company. Right now we're sitting at about 8.4 billion in annual revenue. As you guys can see on the right side of this slide, the majority of that revenue is generated in North America. We do have operations in the UK, Mexico, and Canada. We have over 63 million square feet of managed warehouse space. We have 6.1 billion of FUM, so that's freight under management that we manage for our customers. We have 40,000 employees to date, and we have just a little over 8,600 drivers on our teams, and also over 5,400 maintenance technicians that work on our fleet. Our fleet is right about 250,000 vehicles that we manage and run. So it's a large company, and our solutions really are very, very complex and integrated, and that's where customers find value in us is bringing their complex logistics operations to our doorstep and having us manage it so they can really focus on providing what they do for their customers, whether it be in retail or the automotive industry, technology, CPG. We really service, pretty much any industry that you can think of. So that's just a little bit about the company. So getting into our CAB programs, like I stated, we started our CAB programs about 7 years ago. And right now we have 4 very successful advisory board programs. Those programs are focused on food and beverage, which is our largest industry that we service across all of our lines of business. So we have a food and beverage CAB. We also have an enterprise customer advisory board that is a mix of all the industries we service, as well as the solutions we service. We have an e-commerce customer advisory board that we just kicked off this year that I'm really excited about because we started our e-commerce product line about 2.5 years ago. And then we also have a carrier advisory board, which is not a customer board, but it is a board for our carriers that we partner with in order to, manage our freight with our customers. And so we thought it would be advantageous to get them together in a board so that we could better learn how to partner with them to serve our customer base. At this point, we've had 36 CAB meetings and calls in total in the past 7 years. It feels like more than that, but that's a good number. We have currently 73 members that participate with us. And I will tell you all that in the beginning, it was like pulling teeth to get members to join our CAB and also to just find the right members. And now literally this morning, I got, I think, 2 emails from VPs of operations in different points of the company saying, hey, I've got a new person who really wants to join one of the customer advisory boards. What do you think? So now it's kind of hand over fist of getting great members to join. And we have developed over 5 products directly from our customer advisory board's guidance and influence and suggestions. So it's been a pretty cool 7 years to watch the evolution of our boards.
Excellent. Very, very good, Stephanie. Thank you very much for the overview on Ryder and on the advisory board program. So I would like to start the fireside chat. And, the first thing that comes to mind when I look at the amazing job you do at Ryder is the incredible level of executive support. The leadership team, the senior leadership team of Ryder, and all the way to the CEO and chairman of the board of a Fortune 500 company. It's just incredible to me. I mean, I've been in this business since 1997, and it's almost like seeing a unicorn when you see a CEO and chairman of the board not only coming to kind of like state of the industry, state of the business, for 30 minutes and then disappear, but actually coming to the entire meeting, even if it's 2 or 3 days, going to every virtual call, not looking at his phone. And obviously the leadership team is the same. So why don't we start there, Stephanie? I think it would be really important for the audience today to understand, how did you get to that position, that rarefied position?
Yeah, listen, I agree with you. It is somewhat of a unicorn, and I don't think it's something that is normal in most Fortune 500 companies, the level of engagement. And I will say this about our leadership team. I think the level of engagement they have in a lot of areas is pretty impressive. So I think that's one of the things that just makes the culture of this company so incredibly healthy, is that there is this vested interest from leadership in what it is that, we are investing in and that we are, participating in. I think that for the CAB specifically, the leadership engagement there is really born out of a place of when Robert decided that, through his sort of legacy of being a CEO, he really wanted to focus on growth of the company, right? Like I stated, when he came into his position with Ryder as the CEO. First of all, he grew up at Ryder. He'd been at Ryder for 20 years. When he became the CEO, he had held several different positions throughout the company. And I think what he really realized is that Ryder had a great value and a great offering. But again, we were really like a very, very well kept secret. And part of that is because of the industry we're in, right? A lot of people like to use their logistics partner as sort of their secret sauce in the background that's making them more competitive. So it's hard for the type of company we are for people to raise their hand and say, hey, tell your friends about us.
Right.
Give us some kudos. But that being said, we had a real opportunity to continue to grow and to figure out where we could innovate next in this industry. And so with that, figuring out what he needed to do to make that happen was when he really decided he needed a growth arm. The board guided him in that way. You need to develop a marketing department. You need to really focus on product development. You need to start to grow. And so when he brought in Karen and we, started the boards, Karen's guidance to the leadership team was where we as a company, I think, are struggling is in our focus on our customers. We're very Ryder focused. And at the time they really were. They hadn't developed a product in over 15 years. They were selling the same thing. And it was like, either you fit your square peg into the round hole or you don't. That's all we have. And the feedback mechanism wasn't there. It was like, oh no, our customers are great. They love us, but there's really no way to gauge that, right? Because nobody was really taking the temperature of the customers. And so Karen very much said, look, if you want to grow, you need to start with your customer base. You really need to become customer obsessed. And Robert took that as a real focus and challenge. And so when we started the boards, him and the leadership team all sort of started out very excited about it and said, yes, this is something we want to be involved in. And as the years have gone on, I will say, it's not that when these CAB meetings are going to come up, everybody's like, I can't wait, 3 days at a hotel and, just not having to focus on any of my other work and just talk to customers. But what ends up happening is you get everybody engaged, you book their calendars with enough advance time, they know that it's coming. And what ends up happening every single time that we have these meetings is afterwards, I get approached by almost every person on our leadership that attends, from Robert, the CEO, to John Diaz, our CFO, both of the presidents of the different divisions. And everybody says that was such well worth 3 days of our time, because it's the only chance they have to get into the room and literally hear from the mouths of their customers things that are going on in the industry, pain points that they're having, innovations that they're interested in. And so they find it so incredibly valuable that it's kind of like every year when it comes around, I just have to remind them about that. Like, I know it's 3 days, you got to shut down everything else you're doing. But at the end of it, everybody just feels really validated in the fact that it's such a good use of their time.
Excellent. So like you said, Stephanie, I mean, it started with Robert, the CEO and chairman of the board, having a growth agenda and a customer obsessed agenda. And then Karen Jones, the CMO, who was the executive that actually initiated the entire advisory board effort. What would be your advice to other companies that might not have that level of executive support to start with? How would you build support? Because I mean, you've been able to build support within the business units as well, and that's an ongoing job. Like you said, you have to prove the value each and every time.
Yes, I agree. I think there's a couple different things. First of all, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, and everybody needs to understand that, and you need to kind of be comfortable with that. I think that it starts with, small wins. So if you already have a board program in place, in order to sort of amplify that and get more executive engagement, or, get more sort of the overall value being seen, I think that looking at what things are you focused on as a company right now, and how could you utilize your customer base to really impact those with feedback in real time. So having, even if you can't get, your leadership at a meeting, making sure that the topics you talk about and the information you get are very, very relevant, and then taking that back. The other thing I'd say too is that you, as somebody who's running a board, are always going to be a champion of it. I think getting other champions in the company to make sure that they're supporting your efforts is really where you're going to get a lot of validation for what the board has to offer. And I've utilized that several times where I, for example, want to bring something to our customer advisory board because I really know that they're going to help me elevate the conversation to Robert's level. And then I'm going to be able to get him to focus in on something I want the company to really focus on, right? But I'm not going to go into leadership and fight for it, because then it's very clear, you know, Stephanie wants this, but I can have those conversations with some of the, you know, other leadership, presidents of a division, where I'll say, hey, I know you're really looking to launch this new transportation logistics product. Let's bring that to the board. Why don't we have the board tell us what's going on in the industry and how that would be valuable? Because then Robert will hear it firsthand from the customers, and they're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So really using that board as a tool, and not just a, hey, 3-day session where we're just gonna, you know, chit chat with our customers. I mean, what things are really valuable that we can gain from these sessions together, and that I and that other leaders in the company can utilize for us to build strategy moving forward. So I think those are the most kind of important things that you could focus on.
Right, that's a really, really important point. And I would encourage all, you know, the participants, if you have questions, you can use the chat function or the Q&A. We'll try to answer questions as they come in. I would like to move to another dimension of the advisory board programs at Ryder that it's fascinating, right? At Ignite, we talk about the fact that when someone joins a board, they wear 2 hats. The first one is the customer hat or the client hat. And usually that's the way people look at the relationship between their position as members of a board and the particular company that is sponsoring the board. You always look at it through the prism, through the lens of the client or customer hat. You know, your relationship, what you're trying to do, opportunities, challenges, all of that. However, there is another role for advisory board members, and that's in the word advisory, right? They could act as industry advisors. Aside from their direct relationship with Ryder or with your company, for the people that are in attendance, they could act as almost like McKinsey consultants, right? Industry consultants that are looking at a situation, a product, a challenge, an opportunity objectively, and are able to take off the customer hat, put on the advisor hat for an entire session, or it could be an entire day. Now, it's easier said than done, and Ryder is doing it beautifully. So Stephanie, if you can elaborate on how exactly it's done and what have been the results out of it.
Yeah, I think that this function is one of the most valuable that the CAB can bring. And of course, when we started our customer advisory boards, we didn't start utilizing this function, right? We started more on these are our customers. We want to get them in a room. We want to hear what's working, what's not working. We want to talk about industry trends and focus on what we can do for them specifically. But as time has moved on and we've gained greater partnerships with the customers in the room, some of these board members have been on the board and with us for the full 7 years that we started. And I think having that sort of level of engagement from the board members has helped a lot with this too, because they're very invested at this point in not only, you know, their time with Ryder, but also their time with their counterparts on this board too. So what we started to do was really look at the function of the board and say, how else can we really utilize the time together for us to figure out, you know, where we as a company should be going overall, not just in the impact to the customer. So in certain areas that we've thought about when it comes to product development, especially, we have spun off and created some LLCs, for example, that were more of a retail offering to non-customers. Our customers could utilize them too, but even people who weren't current customers of Ryder, brand new offerings. And so we were able to utilize the board to say, hey, look, instead of us going out and paying thousands of dollars for focus groups and, you know, bringing in companies to run surveys and all of this good stuff, let's just talk to our customers who are in this industry, who have some of these pain points and who could guide us on where should we invest? And, if we were to create a product that would do X, Y, and Z, what would be the barriers of entry to that? And where would people have questions about, why is Ryder doing this? Or so that's really where the conversation started. Now, I would say that you and the Ignite team have been really key in helping us guide those customers to understand the difference between being a customer and thinking of something from that viewpoint of like, this is impacting me specifically in my business,
Right.
to being an advisor and saying, all right, this isn't about me and my business. It's really about Ryder as, a logistics company and provider, and how can they offer, the industry the next big thing that's going on. So if I'm just going to sit here as an advisor on a board for them, what would my suggestions and advice be? And I think that your team has helped us do a really nice job in meetings, separating when they need to be what. And so that's been really powerful for us.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Stephanie. And what about sometimes there could be some sensitivities, right? When you discuss with members strategic issues or potential product launches that, could have some implications. It seems to me that, you need to have a culture of transparency and trust first and foremost before you actually attempt to do something like that.
Yeah. And I will say that it's still not the easiest thing. I mean, we just in our last board meeting with our food and beverage board decided that we wanted to present to them a new retail offering that we would be launching in this upcoming year, right? And when I brought that to leadership to say, hey, this is what I'd like to focus on in this next session, because I really feel like they could give us some great guidance, there was a lot of pushback at first. It was like, we don't really want customers on this offering. And by the way, this offering is at a retail cost. So they're going to start thinking about how much they pay for this maintenance service versus how much we're going to be charging in a retail atmosphere. And, some of them already have a contract with us on something similar. And what if they want to jump bait? And so there was a lot of that back and forth. And so we had to have several sessions with leadership to kind of, and again, this is one of those areas where I took a back seat and thought, I need to talk less about this. And I really need some people who are going to be launching this product, the product owners, to step up and say, hey, this is why it's kind of important for me to understand the mindset of this type of customer in the industry, because although they are our customer, they are similar to the target that we'll be going after. And I want to know what the barriers are. And I want to know where we haven't thought this out fully, or, what they might know about, other competitors in the marketplace that maybe we don't know. So, there was a couple different sessions. And I think after, enough people sort of started to realize what it is we wanted to gain, they said, all right, let's do this. But they gave us some parameters. We don't want to talk about pricing. We don't want to, so there was some things that you put in place to kind of protect yourselves a little bit. And then sure enough, after the session, it was like, oh my God, that was awesome. And the feedback was amazing. And now we have all this content we can take back and sort of, segment and put into different areas so that we can understand, like, here's some things that we need to use as guidance as we launch this project.
Okay, great. I mean, that's brilliant. So it's a combination of a leap of faith, right? You're trusting the members, you're trusting your own executive team to actually listen in. And I love the part about, not doing all the work yourself, having the products, the experts, it takes a village, right? You're not trying to push the agenda on your own. So that's great. And we have a question from Shannon. And I'll turn it over to you, Stephanie, I'll read you the question. Everyone is so busy. I find that our advisory board meetings end and then colleagues don't have time to follow up or take action on what they heard. Any suggestions?
Yeah, my suggestion is that's really your job. So here's the thing. If you are going to be heading up the boards, one of the things you need to do to be able to show the value is have a process and a plan for afterwards. How are you going to disseminate that information that was learned and shared, follow up on it. And like I said, again, we're lucky to partner with Ignite, because Ignite really helps us put together those plans and gather all the bits and bobs that come out of these things. And they take on a huge amount of that legwork for us, which is fantastic. But I also have a great team that works for me. It's not just me doing this. At this point, I'm kind of like the figurehead that shows up and has great conversation, but I've got a great team that's also documenting everything. And then they get with me so we can segment things out and say, who needs to own what from our operations teams, our leadership teams, our subject matter expert teams. And then it's our job to run around and get those people and say, hey, here's what we heard in this meeting. Here's what your action item would be or follow up. Are you okay with that? Do you agree with that? Okay, here's a timeline that makes sense to us. Is that something doable? Great. And then we really take on the communication with the customer base to say, great meeting. Here's an executive recap. Here's what we heard. We're going to follow up with X, Y, and Z. And then we've got to formulate sort of the get-togethers between those subject matter experts and the customers that want more information or whatever it is it needs to follow up. But it kind of needs to be your team driving it so that you can show the value and nobody just has the meeting and then forgets everything that was, valuable.
Great answers, Stephanie. Good. So moving on to another topic, the pandemic, obviously, and the fact that we all had to go to virtual and Zoom fatigue. And how do you keep virtual meetings interesting and engaging? What are some of the things that you have seen, and what is your outlook for? I'm sure everyone is interested to learn about your outlook for next year. Do you think that in-person meetings are finally coming back? So, kind of a two-part question. Let's start with virtual, what works, and then outlook for next year.
Yeah. So, I think in the past 18 months, we've really sort of had some great success and some misses with virtual, lots of learning lessons, which is good. I would say that at first, I think that the vibe was like, well, we can't meet. Let's just hold off on this, right? And then it became very obvious that like, this isn't going to be like a 3-month thing. And it's important to keep the momentum of these boards going. It's important for the engagement. And not only that, we were facing, especially in our industry, a huge crisis and a massive amount of complexity. I mean, everybody on the phone here knows that you couldn't get toilet paper for quite a while, right? Like, well, that was us. So, we had all kinds of things that were just so incredibly stressful for everybody, for us, for our customers, for the industry as a whole. So it really was the right time to make sure that we were getting people together. I would say a couple things with our learning lessons from virtual. First of all, you need to keep it short. You can't have half-day virtual meetings or full-day virtual meetings. It doesn't work. You can't, no matter how engaging the content, people just cannot focus in online the way that they can if they're in a room interacting with people, right? So you need to have realistic expectations on timing. And that means that you also can't build an agenda that's like jam-packed with stuff, right? Because you're just not going to get through it, and people just aren't going to be able to move at the pace that you want them to move at. So picking 1 to 2 very key topics is, I think, the most important thing. I also found, again, thank goodness that our leadership was very engaged on virtual, but like hearing from the leadership, especially during a time like going through, a pandemic, a global crisis, was very key. And it was the favorite part of all of our members to be able to get, a 15 to 20-minute update from Robert on sort of what his perspective was on what was going on with the industry and like the outcome and what would be happening over the next, 10 months in our viewpoint. So I think that was great. Also sticking to very relevant topics. So as much as we might want to talk about some product we're developing, the only thing anybody wanted to talk about was the pandemic, right? And right. Where they were and what their pain points are and what is somebody else, that's a counterpart of them, what are they doing to solve this? So we very much had to respect that and make sure that we built the agenda based around what was very relevant for our members at the moment, no matter how sick of talking about it we all were, Right. So I think that was important. I think the cadence is important too. You can't overdo it. You can't say we're going to get together virtually 4 times, right? But a couple times a year, I think that makes sense. And that was really kind of what worked for each one of our cabs. I think moving forward, I will say this too, our cab members really liked, we decided that we would also sort of send little gift packages and do something fun on the calls. So like, for example, for one of the calls, we sent a flight of whiskey and we had, somebody come in who owned a distillery to talk through the whiskey.
That was great. That was great. I really, yeah.
And it what the members kept telling us was we really miss our time networking, right? So we figured out a way to push them into smaller rooms so that they could drink their whiskey and have, a chance to meet with 5 of the members instead of being in a room with 30 people, right? So I think those little things, just trying to figure out how to utilize the virtual time and make it as normalized as possible, were really beneficial to everybody. I will say that there is nothing that's going to replace in person for these things, right? People just really, they like to get face to face. They like to have the one-off conversations that you have in the break time where you get, 10 minutes with somebody else to be able to just talk about something relevant to you. So what we really are hoping and pushing for in 2022 is we are going to go back to our in-person meetings. I feel very strongly that we're in a good place, that it will happen. Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of people who, at this point have been vaccinated or are working on their 3rd booster shot. I think people are getting more comfortable with the idea of coming back into meeting rooms. We will be very sensitive. Ryder has a very, very strong safety culture, which Eyal, I know you're very familiar with. So, we'll probably start out making sure that we have plenty of room in a meeting with, lots of social distancing. So it's not like people are on top of each other right away. We'll probably do something like allow them to wear a band if they're good with, shaking hands or giving hugs, and, a different color band if they don't want to be touched. So we'll do little things. Just
so having all the guardrails in place,
all the guardrails,
right?
Make sure everybody's really comfortable. But yeah, I think it's important to try to get these guys back together in person as quickly as possible. So I think we're shooting for the beginning of Q2.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. There is another question from Christina, and that relates to the account management team, or the salespeople. The point that Christina is making, that they own the customer relationship and they definitely want to be engaged and involved, and perhaps they want to come to the meeting and sit in. How do you handle it, Stephanie?
Yeah, so we have sort of a no tolerance rule with this, which I'm sure every account management salesperson hates. But at the end of the day, the cab is not the right place to sell, and it's not the right place to bring the vibe that you're going to be selling. So what we actually do is we have our 2 leadership. So we have 2 senior vice presidents over sales. We used to have 1 chief sales officer who would come to the meeting, but after he retired, we just have our senior vice presidents of each division, and they attend the meeting so that they're there to kind of hear it. They do not talk a lot in the meeting. Right. They don't, they're not engaging in the discussion, but they're there to be able to hear and listen. And then they both obviously have really great relationships with the customers. So often after dinner, they'll go out for drinks with some of the customers, and that's fine because they're obviously at an executive level where they're not trying to inappropriately sell during this time. But, we have had salespeople who have mysteriously shown up at the hotel that we're having these events. And, we're very rigid on it, that this is not the right time to engage with their customers. They have, 363 other days of the year that they can engage with their customers. But at these events, these are really about, us getting candid feedback from the customers, not a sales opportunity. So that's kind of how we handle that.
That's perfectly aligns with what we think at Ignite. We feel that, in terms of sales involved in advisory board meetings, you need to have the most senior sales executives in the meeting. If there's only one, that's even better. Mm-hmm. And there's a caveat there, right? It needs to be the right person, meaning some of the sales executives are just so passionate, they will try to sell you without even realizing it. Even if you talk to them until you're blue in the face, they will continue to try to sell and defend their positions and, try to get information on the competition and all that good stuff. So we had cases where we had to pretty much tell the executive sponsor that a particular sales executive is not the right person to be in the meeting. But I would say that the vast majority of senior sales executives would understand that this is not it's not a sales event.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And another question from Bobby here relating to that, we seem to be getting a lot of traction on that track, is do you give the sales executive a report out after the meeting? Are they getting an overview of what the client said? What do you do, Stephanie, to make sure that the account teams, the sales teams actually are aware of what's going on, what happened in the meeting?
Yeah, so that's another really good question. Our customer advisory members are very much aware that these meetings are sort of confidential in their commentary. And, we have huge brands that we work with and that are represented, right? And so we have sort of very transparent conversations. And let's say one of our members is talking about an issue at his company or her company, right? And something they're really struggling with, right? We want to make sure that we're protecting that information and that it's not something that everybody in our company has access to then talk about, because, then what if there's a relationship with their boss and they're like, oh, this happened in the CAB meeting. So again, we are pretty private about the information that goes on. I think it's sort of a need to know basis. So if there's direct feedback about product development or something going on in the industry that we feel is pertinent for somebody on any of the teams to know, then obviously that's something we share. We don't talk about specific account relationships on our CABs. So it's not like there would ever be information about, an interaction between a CAB member and an account owner that they would need to know, because we don't discuss that type of things at the CAB. That's not what the CAB's for. So it's not that we do an executive recap that does not get distributed to everybody in our company. It goes to the people who attend the CAB and our executive leadership. There have been times where I have reached out to an account owner to say, I'm getting a vibe that something might be going on with our relationship with whichever customer, I want you to be aware and let me know if there's anything. And so I have done that before, but I don't give specifics. So that's kind of how we handle it. Again, the two lead salespeople are in there. If they feel like there's something that their teams need to know, they obviously would probably report that back, but that's not something that I, personally engage in.
Okay, perfect. We have a few more minutes left, Stephanie. So last question, and then we're going to wrap up. This is for Maria. What makes a good advisory board member, and what doesn't make a good fit for a CAB member?
Great question. So I personally think there's a couple of things to look at when you're looking at an advisory board member, right? You want to look at it from your perspective, and then you want to look at it from their perspective. So making sure that you have the right level of member is important. So let's say that you're building a board and you want everybody in that board to sort of be around a leadership decision-making level, right? So you're looking for vice presidents, you're looking for maybe senior group directors, you're looking for, senior vice presidents.
Right.
It is not advantageous then to bring in a manager level into the board. They're just not going to mesh well with the other members, and they won't be on the same level of thinking and strategic, sort of decision making. So making sure that you kind of form the board in, a consistent manner, I think is important. I also think having a member that is very engaged, so not a wallflower that's not going to ever offer any contribution that, you're constantly going to be trying to drag information out of. It just makes it difficult for everybody in the room. You really want to have people who are engaged and interested in being there and wanting to give feedback. On the other flip side of that, you also don't want somebody that's going to dominate the entire conversation. We have a few of those. Yeah. It is often hard to manage them. And so I spend a lot of time texting in the background, like, that's enough talking from that person. So, you want somebody kind of in the middle there, somebody who can be respectful of other people's voices, but also has a voice of their own. From your viewpoint, I think it's really advantageous for you to look for accounts that have growth potential. So bringing somebody into your fold of executive leadership and sort of entrusting them with this, privileged relationship is going to help you grow their account. And we've seen that, I can attribute actual revenue back to our customer advisory board, which is fantastic. I mean, it's just an extra added bonus for us, right? So although we're not selling in this environment, it is a tool for you to use to make sure that you build and grow a relationship that could be really beneficial to your company. So I think that's something to look at as well. If you talk about not good customers, we just recently, when we launched our e-commerce CAB, had a really uncomfortable experience. It was like the first time I've ever experienced this, but we brought somebody onto the board who at the time, there was there was contention in sort of the startup of his account with our company, right? There was
Right.
miscommunications. There was things that he wasn't happy with. There's things that we weren't happy with. But we put him on the board anyway, because we thought, well, this is a company that's up and coming, and it has been, a partnership that we were interested in growing, and this could be beneficial. He came into the board meeting, and it was very disruptive. In that first board meeting, he spent a lot of time trying to sort of gain a following of like what Ryder was doing wrong. And it was
blatant and it was obvious.
It was blatant and it was obvious. It was uncomfortable.
Right.
I was having to manage it in the background with emails to this guy. So you really want to be careful to make sure that, you don't need to have pristine relationships with your customers. That's not ever going to happen, right? You're going to form a board, and there might be things that happen on the account that aren't great, but as long as you know that the customer is respectful, and that they are mature, and that they have a vested interest in the partnership with your company, they'll behave themselves. If you get somebody that you're like, I'm not sure, I just got this feeling that they're going to take this down a different path, don't go that way, because it will not turn out well. It won't turn out well. So
excellent advice. Excellent advice. Yeah, I mean, we are running into some pretty hairy situations, right? When you run cabs.
Yes.
I mean, it's yeah, could get stressful. Stephanie, this has been phenomenal insights, phenomenal perspectives. Thank you so much for coming to the webinar and sharing your experience with all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Extremely helpful. I think the level of insight that you have into how to run multiple boards at such a high level is just phenomenal. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it. And
we are going to wrap up. Tatiana, I think we have kind of like the wrap up comment, and I'm seeing all the comments from everyone that they really liked it, Stephanie. So again, it's all you. I mean, you did an unbelievable job. We out of time. If you want to schedule a free cab evaluation, one of the Ignite cab experts, free of charge, will be happy to meet with you and talk to you and hear about your program and offer some recommendations. And we also have what I believe the best resource center anywhere, webinars, white papers, case studies, examples. So feel free to go to igniteag.com. Thank you very much, everyone. And Stephanie, huge thanks to you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.